Hi Jen, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Shira?
Doing well. Thanks for sending over that outline. You're the first.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for making it easy to do so.
Trying to just get my thoughts organized for this today. Let's see.
I know it's been so pretty lately. I don't know where you live, but oh my goodness, the spring has been amazing because it's pretty much summer.
I'm in Florida, so we're just
Okay.
now turning from the oh it's so beautiful to the
The
things
hot,
are gonna kill
yeah.
me now. Like the sun is out to get me and the bugs are coming back from
Yeah.
wherever they went.
Do you
Um,
get to visit up in Vermont?
I'm actually coming next week.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
very excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful time of year and the temperature at about 70, even 80, it's not too humid, so it's been really nice.
Yeah. It's one of those amazing times where so my husband and I are both based in Florida and we both have to go to Vermont at the same time for work. So
Nice.
hoping maybe we can come a little early and like maybe do a hike or something like that. Be fun.
Yeah, are you going to be in Burlington?
I'll be in Montpelier.
Hmm.
Um And he has two different places that he has to go to that I forgot.
Yeah,
Where-
well, nothing's too far from anywhere else, so
Yeah,
you can get pretty far after work to do some exploration.
yeah. So yeah, pretty excited about that.
Good.
And hi Alex, thanks for joining.
Hi, how are you guys?
Doing
Hello.
well, how are you?
Good, thanks. I'm just gonna be listening, so
No worries at all.
thanks.
Hi Donna, welcome. Hi Chris, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
Hi, Jen.
And I see a message from Donna. So I may try to get into the meeting again. I cannot unmute. No worries. And it looks like she just dropped off. Okay.
Doo-doo-doo.
Hi, Julie. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Donna's, no worries. It's like Donna's coming back in. I know Dominic won't be joining us today. I'm not sure if Mia is joining. Let me see who else. Here's Ben coming in now. Yeah, and it doesn't look like Pike RSVP'd yet, so I'm not sure if he'll be coming. So it may just be Jen, Chris, and Ben today from the group.
Okay, and I do have to hop off at 3. I have another meeting at 3.
No worries. Yeah, we'll keep it to the 1 hour. Um, okay, Ben, there you are, nice and settled.
Hello. Yep.
Hey, Ben.
Good
Uh,
afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. So we have a few members of the public here today, so we'll try to make sure that we keep some points in between for public comment, but really today is in your hands, the subgroup. And I'll just do a little bit of reminding of kind of what we talked about at the last meeting and some of the outcomes that we were looking for out of this group. So basically the EAG wanted this subgroup to reconvene to talk about how you saw just people in general using the rubric. So whether that be the tag or the PUC or any other group that has access to this rubric, consider incorporating the language from Pike, which I can insert in the chat.
Thank you.
And so just reading it out loud for the public record. So is the decision-making process for the proposed clear, honest, and transparent? Are potential harms of the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed? Are potential beneficiaries of the proposed action clearly identified? And is the benefit clearly articulated? So that's a small point, just whether or not you'll input that language into the framework itself. And then some of the other things that we've talked about doing and we haven't had the chance to do is using this framework to walk through a like a straw proposal. So either the memo on credit ownership to see if that's equitable and if it makes sense, and through that process kind of cleaning up some of the language where it might be appropriate to make sure that it's clear enough for somebody to just pick up and be able to use. So those are the things that we're trying to accomplish. I will put it into your hands. Jen has said that she has a hard stop at 3. I also have a hard stop at 3, so we'll try to get as much as we can get done in this 1 hour as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Sharon.
So that's I really appreciate the kind of the recap. I don't. Would it be helpful if we shared a copy of the existing document that we shared over to the tag? I don't have a copy at my fingertips.
I'll try to pull it up, but if anybody else has it, is able to get it quicker, please do.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I have my copy printed out right here, so I hadn't had it on my screen, so yeah. But
Yeah, I think that'd
oh.
be helpful to, if we go through maybe question by question, but maybe initially we want to kind of address just general guidelines on how it's used. I think we've all shared it, and but maybe kind of more of a consensus. I did run into somebody from the tag group, and I think the expression I got was that they were happy to, to have it. But I think a little bit more guidance on what we meant by sharing it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I like that idea. We can start kind of at the top there, and what's the overall intent really of the document. We have at least a copy that I'm looking at. I believe it's dated April 16th. We have all the preamble with the whereas statements in the beginning. Those I think are helpful at framing, the context in which this is being created. And I think a couple of them could, of course, I think broadly, this I think should be used by the Public Utility Commission to, as they're writing the rules, when they're developing, it says in the statute that the Equity Advisory Group is here to assist the Public Utility Commission in developing and implementing the clean heat standard in a manner that ensures an equitable share of actions are delivered to Vermonters with low income and moderate income. And to me, that really summarizes the whole point of this rubric, to really ensure that it's baked into the process. It's the procedural equity gets checked off there. So that's how I've kind of been framing that in my mind, is that this is sort of used as as the clean heat standard is being developed. This should be pretty central or part of the process before like issuing an order, for example, from the Public Utility Commission. The rubric here should be consulted for that action or proposed rule that's being suggested.
I agree with that, Ben. I think in addition to the PUC, maybe the tag being provided to them for those same reasons, that I come back to Srini's words, which are, the programs where the equity was looked at as the program was being developed was much more efficient, and also had, like you said, baked in equity, as opposed to trying to go backwards and say, oh, is it equitable? So I think that was our intent. We can't be there at every decision, nor do we hold, all the knowledge about equity. But what I think we can share as a diverse group of people were these questions that any group looking to apply equity to their decision could feel like they had checked a lot of boxes and brought in questions on how it affects a broad group of people.
Don't mean to interrupt, but I did just drop the document in the chat, so you can
Thank
have
you.
that for your reference. Then I'd also recommend, if there's anyone, because we will have to report back, if there's anyone who wants to take notes and just keep track of the conversation, that would be great.
Can do that. I'm kind of doing it on paper. There's no reason I can't stick it on the
Thank you,
doc.
Chris.
Well, on the screen here.
Do
Yeah,
we
so
want to put that, what we just expressed, if you agree with that, Chris, too, in some kind of a sentence or two that we could
Yeah,
put in the document or send along?
that is the exact. We have consensus, and there's no disagreement on that one. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just getting my screen share in place here so I can take notes and make sure it's consistent with what host disabled participant screen sharing. That's all right. That's all right, Shira. I don't mind if you take notes. I mean,
Go ahead. It should be enabled.
thanks.
I wonder if we could put, maybe we could even add it to the whereases.
Yeah.
Whereas plural, whereas it's seen as more beneficial for questions of equity to be included in the decision-making process. And whereas we feel these questions would allow people to have a diversity of now I'm stuck. So someone else has to take it, but something about that we offer this guidance as a way to help people look at a wide variety of questions and how it affects a diverse group of people.
Let's see, and I'm just reviewing what we had written below the whereas statements. There's the, therefore the equity advisory group offers this rubric too, and there's 4 bullet points. So we did write to assist the commission in developing and implementing the Queen Eats standard in a manner that ensures an equitable share of actions are delivered to Vermonters with low and moderate income. I think that's pretty clear. The second one we had was to assist the commission in assessing whether proposed action will equitably serve all Vermonters. We did include in the third point for adoption by the technical advisory group to assist the TAG to evaluate proposed actions through an equity lens. And the one actually on this, I had noted, I kind of marked up this copy here, but the fourth point that we had written originally was to assist delivery agents and obligated parties to create actions that serve all Vermonters. And I do feel as though we can kind of, I don't know if having obligated parties use this rubric is necessarily the best use of it, or really because my feeling is that if the rules and implementation process of the Queen Eats standard is done in a way that ensures equity, and by the time an obligated party gets to the point of installing a Clean Eat measure, it should be, again, kind of already baked into the rules, so to speak. So at that point, it's sort of, when Clean Eat measures are being installed to create credits, that's, equity has already been thought about. Like the reason they might be in that person's mobile home or in their apartment, wherever they may be, is because equity was, included in the implementation process. So I feel as though that might be a little too granular for this, and more of this needs to be a little bit higher up the decision-making process, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think the intent was to have, everybody use it the whole way down the line, but
Right.
in matters of procedure and policy and action, that they be used.
So
Yeah.
how do you, they're questions, and there's no, you can't compel somebody to answer them really well or as intended. How do we mitigate that? Like, I just sometimes equity is an opinion sometimes, and for different people, and what is an equitable outcome is there's not a consistency there. How do we I don't know. I don't want to. The enabling act specifically says that an equitable outcome will be, designed or something like that. How do we kind of just, if we're feeling like maybe that's not happening, or how do we demonstrate that, hey, we did evaluate this, and this is how we evaluated it, and this is the this is the output of that evaluation, because there does have to be an evaluation, right? It can't just be, well, we feel it is. Like, okay, well, show us your math of how you got to that decision that this was the equitable outcome.
Right. So you're saying, from the perspective of somebody, I think it's an excellent point, because basically what you're saying, somebody could, pick up this rubric and just cruise through it and, answer it just really superficially and not really, give it some critical thinking. So
Yeah.
Like, from what I'm like, another way to phrase your question would be like, is there anything that we can write into the questions to, like, basically as sort of like a check back or a way to ensure that this is, really being used as intended? And that's a great question.
And there's no way to compel some, but maybe it'd be helpful to articulate that's its intended uses. Show your math how you came to this out. It's
Right.
I think in the Austin form, it said that if there were any negative scores or any negative consequences that the group or the action takers should not go forward. So maybe it's possible. I think some of the language that that Pike pointed out about, you know, maybe ending with, you know, is the action clear, honest, and transparent?
Yep.
So that the equity issues could be addressed. And were there any potential harms to a certain group that became obvious while doing this rubric?
Yep.
So you ask, you know, I agree. I don't think you can enforce someone filling out the form in a certain way, but I think there's, you know, there's a general intent, I think, on most people to when faced with these questions, to do something equitable, especially if you point out areas where equity is required, but also asking, you know, do you see any harm? You know, do you feel like the action is clear and transparent so that you are able to evaluate it in an equitable fashion? Might be two good questions to ask at the end of the rubric for
Right.
accountability.
Donna, I see your hand. We will be taking public comment a little bit later. We'll pause for public comment a little bit later into the agenda. But yeah, just wanted to.
I'm okay if, like, I know Donna from South Burlington. I'm okay if there's like a little. I don't want to get to the end of this process and be like, oh, I wish I knew that at the beginning.
Sure, yeah. If you think now is a good time to pause, but let's do it.
Is that okay with Jen
Sure.
and Ben?
Sounds
Yes.
great. Yeah.
That goes, obviously that goes for Julie, and I thought I saw Alex on here earlier.
Yeah, we have Alex, John, Julie,
Oh,
and
John.
Anna. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because it struck me because I've been involved in efficiency programs since I originally moved here in 1992. And the whole equity thing always kind of bothered me because the way the programs had been set up back then, there were a lot of steps that people had to take, which made those participating very self-selecting because very few people had you had to have quite a bit of knowledge and quite a lot of smarts to be able to get through the process, you know, and and that's the whole thing about the clean heat standard that I've just been reading a little bit where people have been commenting, including from the department, that that the CVOEO approach is kind of the one process that people with normal understanding of things can actually get through. You know, I worked at Green Mountain Power, I've worked with Efficiency Vermont, and it's just like, I don't know too many people that are really willing to put up with all of the different steps that you have to go through. And so when I say self-selecting, I mean, I think a lot of people just, they don't even get to the point where they're aware of these things. And that's why I thought the equity thing was always a problem, because sure, anybody could qualify and people were even encouraged and there was even additional incentives and things. But if you didn't have 90% of the money available to you and you had to go out for a loan, that stopped most people in their tracks.
Yep.
Things did not proceed because it was just, the hassle factor was just too much. And I just wanted to make sure that, it's like the equity framework, I mean, it's wonderful and it makes so much sense. But, let's make sure that we don't drop people out of the system before you even start. You talk about, answering questions and how do you make sure that people are being included? Well, let's make sure that the process itself doesn't discourage people from inclusion. That's basically what I wanted to say. It's just like, understand that these processes are kind of cumbersome, and they have been cumbersome for quite a long time.
I appreciate that, Donna. Like that's something we've discussed, is just this overall process. in the design. We've kind of raised up of how to make the program accessible. Because to be honest, like the only people that show up is it's usually the same crowd that's fully informed on what's going on, and it's if there is, so for the purposes of today, if there's any suggestions on language on the framework to make that more accessible, this is an inclusive process for that.
And before moving on, if there's anyone else, so we can consider this a public comment period. If there's anyone else who has a comment, please feel free to either raise your hand or speak out into the room. Looks like we just lost John McCormick too, fortunately. All right, thank you.
Jen, I don't think I captured your language here. Additional language for accountability. Were you trying to tie that into what Pike said as you want to adopt his language, or something similar to that?
I was thinking that the two parts I thought could be adopted were whether the actions were conveyed in a clear, honest, and transparent way, so that they were able to be evaluated in an equitable fashion. And then I thought the question, were any potential harms flagged or conveyed? I'm not sure about the potential benefits, because I feel like that's kind of why we're doing this. Like that's kind of baked into the process. But if there is, I mean, all these actions should be beneficial. I think the real question is, are some of them harmful to a certain group of people? And that's revealed after going through the rubric and asking the questions. I think that should be noted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that. You nailed it. I think we need to talk mostly about, or this is, I think you summarized it really well. The rubric here is intended to reveal any potential harms that could be done to, Vermonters broadly, but in particular, the most vulnerable, low income, and underserved Vermonters. So, yeah, I think that probably making that really clear from the outset. And then I think adopting the Austin, and I can't remember I don't know if it's, and if I'm missing it, let me know, but I don't know if it's explicitly written out in here that we said, okay, if you add up, tally up all after answering the questions, you do your +1, -1, or neutral. And then if there is a harm, like the total comes out to a negative number, then that action or that question basically needs to be, it should be revisited. And that's like the whole point, essentially, is to say, okay, that's sort of a check, kind of a stop. Why is this harmful? And then really dive into the reason why it got a negative score on any one of the categories. So I think as long as that, I think there was, having sat in on the tag meeting and listening to that conversation a couple meetings ago, I think that was sort of, I think most people understood what it was supposed to be used for, but it wasn't explicit. So, there was, I think with this sort of thing, it needs to be really clear, so that, it does get applied basically uniformly across the board. I think that's kind of what Pike was getting at with his language there, which I think is the clear and transparent manner. I think that it's really important that folks filling this out are essentially, applying this evenly across the board. So yeah, that's
so just these last couple parts, does that accurately convey, Jen and Ben, what you were trying to say, or could I?
Maybe the second part, maybe just were any were any negative impacts exposed or revealed during the completion of this rubric?
About identified.
Identified, yep.
Then mine, I think you nailed it. I think we should probably change the wording slightly, but revisit the recommendation. Yeah, basically just needs to be revisited, and yeah, the reasons for the negative, a harm, its outcome as a harmful impact should be essentially investigated further. This is the first word that comes to mind, but
We can wordsmith that a little later.
No,
All right.
I'm not sure how the rubric actually shows up graphically, but maybe we could rework that a little bit as far as the boxes and the numbering and how you total them, so it makes it easier for people to use it.
So
I don't know
revisit
if
how
you
we
want to
how
scroll
it's
down.
scored.
I'm not sure in the document exactly what
Yeah.
it looks like, but I think it was pretty graphically pleasing and easy to use in the Austin model, but I'm not sure exactly how our model ended up, whether it was confusing or I think the Austin model had different colors and it was kind of very the boxes were clear.
Yeah. All right. I will cut it. The PDF is a little chunky to convert over to. I just got to convert it to a Word, and I'll cut and paste it in there. But
Okay. I'm just not very good at
let me screen
moving my
share.
screens around.
No, that's all right. Let me screen share the PDF instead. So preamble, therefore, we'll amend the instructions with the comments that we just talked about. And so you're talking about just kind of the how to score that.
I wonder if we want to move the questions into the box itself.
Yeah.
Again, that would take somebody with some graphic
Yeah.
abilities just to make it,
Yeah.
when you see all those questions, I think your mind kind of it feels like it's going to be maybe a lot more work or more difficult than it might be. Whereas if the questions were separate in each box,
So-
you don't have to go up to the question, come down to the rubric.
Yeah. So just does this propose action, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying question one, just that goes in there.
It's just putting that in there, then it's you can
Yeah.
kind of go down and easily go through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Easy
like that.
enough. Okay, so going back to our scope, you can
Sorry, bringing it back just a little bit. I wanted to read a comment, Donna's comment in the chat. So
yeah,
she said it is program access and procedures that need to be accessible technically. This is program design, but is more clear. And just a reminder for everyone else on the call that we try to avoid using the chat just so that we can keep everything with open meeting law. So that's it.
No, I think that's a great point, Donna. I see what we're doing here is basically the folks, to ensure we definitely want to ensure that low income folks, underserved Vermonters can access the clean heat standard to the full potential. So I see this equity rubric as key to really when we set the rules. I think there's some key programs in place around the state right now. Particularly like offered by Efficiency Vermont, for example, that have really great programs for low-income Vermonters, but they might be difficult to seek out or to understand like how to access those. So this, I think could be used by the folks that are ultimately going to be writing the rule, like the Public Utility Commission, to ensure that those programs remain accessible to those folks. And maybe we, through the clean heat standard, we're able to increase access to those programs and utilize the clean heat standard as sort of a unifying mechanism that brings all these programs from around the state together and more easily accessed. That might be something that is considered as part of the rulemaking process. So I think using this rubric, putting it in a broader context such as that, but that's will allow folks to, what I hope to get from it, and I think we kind of captured that with our first opening statements here, is that folks can, realize the broader context for their actions, and think about exactly those types of questions that you just asked in the chat. So we do have an accessibility section, and in light of the question you just asked, I was kind of looking through the language of those questions, and there is a couple questions in that section that I wanted to actually rewrite that I'd flagged myself, but yeah, it's a good reminder for us that they're to keep it framed in reality here. So
Do we feel like we've provided clear instructions to the PUC and TAG for its intended use based on our notes here, or is there more discussion before we move on to Pike's recommended language?
I think so. Again, I imagine each group will use it kind of differently, but the rubric itself, I think, now has enough clarity on it, so
Yep.
people
yeah,
should
what,
feel comfortable using it.
Chris, can you scroll down for, I think this is page 2 on the screen there. I think is where we have the whereas statements on page 1.
It's a little, I tell you, it's a little, I might be deficient in my skills of sharing. So here's the equity rubric,
Yep.
page 2.
Yeah, the page 2 with the it says therefore, yeah, right in here. So I think, did we want to, I raised it a little bit ago. I agree with Jen. I think this is definitely getting more clear, but for example, number 4, do we want to get rid of that? Delete that? Because I think the point I made earlier is that that's sort of, I think we want to, this needs to be utilized before we get to the point where, obligated parties are using it. I really don't know the value of that data. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think we're
Yep.
offering this for use by the first 3, and if somebody else wants to use it down the road, that's fine, but I don't think we.
Yep. Yeah, so we'll strike that number 4. Right.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that sounds good.
All right. Beautiful. So do we want to go to Ben's language that's in the chat? Well, actually, let me stop there. Cher, do you feel like this adequately addressed the kind of the
Yeah.
we'll have to do the wordsmithing, but just the points that we touched on. Do you think that addresses some of the feedback that we heard from Emily back from the TAG group?
I do. And I think,
Okay.
so we do have time for you at the next meeting just to, touch base with the EAG one more time to make sure that
Yeah.
it reflects everything that they want as well.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you. So let's go back to Pike's language that's in the chat. Is the decision-making process for the proposed action clear, honest, and transparent? Are there potential harms of proposed action clearly identified and disclosed? I feel like we just said all that in our instructions. Are potential beneficiaries of the proposed action clearly identified and is the benefit clearly articulated?
Yeah, I think those first 2 are the words I took to be added into the instructions, and then wasn't sure we really needed to say the benefit, because I think we kind of know the benefit.
Right. And the beneficiaries, I think, I'm not sure, there's going to be many groups potentially, that, I mean, identifying the beneficiary, is that kind of, just to kind of think that through more thoroughly here, is that saying that whoever's using this rubric would have a specific group in mind when they do the rubric? Is that like identifying potential beneficiaries? Because I think you know, that could be very broad, it could be very narrow. I don't know if we want to put a definition on that, because I think we want this to be utilized in various different areas in the policy, you know, development and rulemaking process. So, you know, we want it to benefit everyone, right? So, yeah. So I think you said it earlier. We don't need to explicitly say anything about benefits, I think, necessarily. I think it's implied that this is the process of doing this is beneficial for everyone. That's really the reason. Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, Jen. Yeah. So I was just sort of saying that out loud to, you know, for my own benefit. So,
So
This
maybe
is-
the question is where do we want to add that language? In the instruction part?
The first half, first
Right
two
after the
questions.
whereases?
yeah, I think Is it-
Confused now. So going back to the PDF, so I thought we already included the first part in our edits to instructions that will update based on the language or the notes that we took earlier. And
oh,
that-
okay.
And,
Yeah.
and that the last part of his recommendation where there's consensus that that doesn't seem appropriate to include in this, as that the benefits are you know, that's just that's not part of the assessment of negative impact and how we mitigate that negative impact.
That sounds good.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was forgetting that we're looking at the edits we made are not yet added to this document. So I was a little
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, that's my fault.
No, that's all
Okay.
good.
So so on to number 3 of our kind of our tasks for today is kind of walk through a straw proposal and clean up the language a little bit, right? I gotta admit, I am terrible at retaining documents from our meetings.
Sorry. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to
Yeah.
pause to see if anybody else has any comments. So any comments from the public? Okay, great. There we go. So moving on to the straw proposal.
All right. So would it be appropriate to pull up that document that was shared in our last meeting? That was the response back from the tag on
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
I think it might have.
Yeah, I'm looking to pull it up too, but if anybody gets to it before me, feel free.
Thank you.
I don't remember if they had specific questions. I felt like the questions themselves, they were just asking, were they succinct enough to be utilized? I feel like it should be a document that can be done in a fairly efficient way. I mean, again, I imagine it kind of being done off to the sides before you come back for a straw vote. But at the same time, easily accessible questions that kind of don't go off in too many areas.
Right. I agree with that assessment. Yep.
And maybe we should look at go ahead, if sure.
Oh, the documents in the chat, the one from
Okay.
the tag.
Thank you.
Tag response. All right. I'm getting there.
Was this initial? This is on credit ownership, right? So
Yeah. See, it's almost like you almost kind of want to almost do have two different people do the assessment and kind of compare answers sometimes. Like, I don't know, like you shouldn't have to though, right? Okay.
I'm wondering,
Way of going about it.
All right.
I think we should probably narrow, I mean, there's a lot in this memo, but if we want to pick, I think you can kind of go as granular or as large a topic as you want. I think you will, the results of this rubric will probably be better, higher quality results if you really hone in on a specific question.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, we could just pick one of the questions and say, trying to think of like one that would be good. I mean,
well, what about the question that credit ownership should begin with the homeowner?
yeah,
Just
there we
something
go.
easy like that, and just go down to the questions and see if we can answer the questions on that basic assumption.
Yeah,
And I think it should be fair too, also like to use neutral. So like some of these health questions. Anyway,
right. Wouldn't really pertain to the question sometimes. They don't always, and I think that's fine. Yeah.
All right. So where's the question? Is this right here that we're
Yep.
answering? For installed clean heat measures, end use customers are awarded all clean heat credits.
Right. And it is important to note too that the tag did vote for like weatherization to get the credits.
Mm-hmm.
But for this example, we'll just go with this question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I was completing this and scoring it, section 1 under health, question 1, does the proposed action reduce air pollution and reduce asthma and other respiratory related hospital visits?
That one I'd probably say neutral on.
Or
Me.
yeah. Jen?
yeah,
Yeah. All right. Number 2, proposed action extends the expected longevity or quality of life for the populations experiencing health disparities.
neutral again.
Yep.
Reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. Improve mental health.
Yeah. See, I guess you could also for this one, I think, this is actually illuminating because it's like, if we're talking about just receiving credit, I suppose that could make somebody feel good that they have some credits for something that they just purchased and they're gonna, so I would say that would improve mental health. So that I would probably say that's a +1. Like you just got something installed in your house that you're now earning something for, basically for doing that action. So I'd say that's beneficial.
Jen, you're okay with that?
Yeah, I agree.
Proposed action to help restore, protect ecosystem health.
I say that's a +1 too, because whatever is installed is going to reduce
Yeah.
Greenhouse
carbon
gas. Yeah.
emissions.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah. Slow climate change and help the planet. So that would be a +1.
I'll be honest, some of this stuff didn't seem like when I initially read the question for clean heat installed measures, end use customers are awarded all clean heat credits. I was thinking like the transaction itself, the end use customers are awarded the clean heat credit, like that. It's kind of not applicable to health. Like it's just a like a transaction. But
That's also a good point. See, yeah, I think that's the nuances of this rubric, and I think so. You make a good point. I mean, really, all these could be neutral, and it's just like my thought process there, where I was like, hey, that makes you feel good for getting something installed, but if you're so that does it's very illuminating that it's really how it's applied and how the person
like the measure itself would, if we were saying like replacing a, the mobile homes, kerosene furnace that's outdated and, the CO2 and with a clean heat pump, the measure itself does all of these things, but the act of receiving a credit doesn't actually do that. I don't.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I think probably the act of receiving that credit, yeah, probably does not. I think you'd probably still be able to get a +1 for the ecosystem though, because if you, I mean,
And I think there can be differences, I think the main thing is we're ferreting out negative harm.
right.
So that to me is the real beauty of these questions, is if you ask a question and a harm reveals itself, you're directed away from that action, or at least to more discussion.
Right.
Donna, did you want to weigh in quickly before we moved on to the next one?
I think you're muted, Donna.
That most people, including myself, don't really understand what a clean heat credit is. And so I think that if a person who not very familiar with this says that they're going to get a clean heat credit, it might actually cause stress because they don't really know what it means. What does it mean? It means potentially money, but we're not sure where you have to go to get that money. Or, particularly if you're not, that's why CVOEO does such a great job, because they just get the results. They don't have to deal with the financial stuff at all, and I think that the whole idea of these credits can be very confusing. Just wanted to point that out. It's like nobody knows what this really means or how much money it is, or, it's like making it clear at some point that you're not just credits are equivalent to how much money, which essentially is what it's going to be, I assume.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think part of what we're trying to do here is to make sure that when it is rolled out, that it's very transparent, very clear language, and also, have a way for advocacy to make sure that people do understand what's happening. And I agree, that's a very important part of the program.
Yeah, it's like, do you take it to the bank?
Right.
Yeah, no, that has to be clarified.
What do you do with them?
Yeah.
That is spot on. I mean, that's like, I've been thinking about that specifically with manufactured housing, like with the MER program for the mobile home improvement and repair. We work with CBOEO to offer technical assistance with working with lining up contractors and am I getting ripped off or not? And just that technical assistance kind of helps them access the program. And a clean heat credit, like, I'll be honest, like I've been doing this, I still don't fully understand what the clean heat credit is actually going to be. Like, it's just this opaque. Yeah,
Yeah, we're working on developing that, Donna. So it's a really good point. I think it's basically, and to Jen's point, this is going to be used for the folks that will be designing the clean heat credit marketplace. So we're trying to set them up with the tools needed to ask the questions you just did and think about it critically from that perspective, so that once it is rolled out, it's something like a clean heat credit value is abundantly clear and isn't harmful in any way to people and confusing. I would say that harm in a clean heat credit marketplace could be confusion. That would be harmful. So yeah, it's an important point.
Hey, so I just got this feeling Ashir is going to remind me it's 2:50. We got to get moving on. So how do you guys feel about doing some rapid fire, just kind of off the cuff? Let's fly through this.
Actually, sorry, before we move on, I just did want to open for public comment one last time.
Oh, very good.
And Donna, I see your hand still up, but I don't know if that's from. Okay, no worries.
No.
Okay, great. Now fly through.
Cool. And so Chris, just before we do that, I did have a couple edits that I wanted to make to the document that were like basically the language used is confusing. I mean, we'll get to that in a second, I guess, but like under section 3, for example, some of the wording of the question was like confusing and stuff. So I guess that's what we'll illuminate.
Could you copy and paste that into the notes, and because I kind of feel like I was hoping that we could walk out of this, like, we're not going to have the exact language today, but if you would trust me to wordsmith it to meet the intent, and I'll share that with Ashira, and we can distribute that with the group, and
Sure.
then when it goes back to the big group, we'll all just kind of, oh yeah, that's what we. 'Cause
Okay.
we're not going to get the exact language. In
Yeah.
there.
Do you want me to like send an email over to you after the meeting, or I can drop it into chat? But basically, I was just going to say question 3 on section 3 needs to be further defined. They're a little clunky and don't really read very well, but
Section
down.
3, number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's go
so-
through section 3. That sounds good.
All right.
Um,
Accessibility. Hey, does the proposed action
Okay.
expand access to low and moderate income and historically marginalized Spanish and underserved Vermonters? So just the fact of receiving a credit to the homeowner, or well, excuse me, the exact language is end use customers are awarded all clean heat credits. How does the end use customer, I guess define for me end use, that's so if I'm in a multifamily rental property that was built in 1920 and the landlord is not responsible for utilities, and so the tenant is the end use customer the tenant that's paying, you know, a high utility bill, or is it the end use customer, the landlord who owns the property?
Right. In this case, I'd say it's the landlord because it's an installed, talking about installed measures.
Right.
So that would be probably harmful. If you're a low income renter, in this case, you wouldn't benefit from that necessarily. If we're talking about just the credit going to the owner of the building.
Well, I think if the landlord was able to put in a clean heat system, that would be beneficial to the renters.
Well, the 100%, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about just the credit ownership portion, you know, if we're parsing that out and saying, okay, just getting that credit.
So I'm hearing harm and benefit. Number 2.
I just noticed I think that the justification below would be really important for people to fill in, so that when they come to share, because obviously people are going to have different scores.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, just that conversation is really good evidence of how it can be used to bring up situations.
For sure.
I'm thinking that I want to quickly pause us, and instead of using the rest of the time to run through the rest of the rubric,
Yeah.
just kind of having a short conversation on how it feels to actually run through this rubric, and if it's helpful, if there's ways that it can change, if it's getting to what we actually want to get at when we're thinking of equity.
For me, I need a little bit of time, so I would do better taking this and running that question through it, and then coming back with thoughts on it, how it felt for me to do it. I don't
Agreed.
do great with kind of doing things
Off
on
the
the
cuff.
fly.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Overall, I thought it did a respectful or an adequate job of identifying disproportionately impacted communities. It's I think we've quickly identified it's interpretive and it's broad, and so if you apply it to a measure versus an action, it can be just maybe it's more helpful for if we were to change the question. You might feel like, oh, this doesn't really apply, but it does force that conversation, and that is the whole point of this, is that we have that conversation, we reconcile that, and we document it. And that's the whole point of this, because I don't, the whole point of this exercise is that we come out of this saying, oh, we didn't really think about that. I didn't
Exactly.
know that, renters in a 1920 building with, who pay more in heat than their actual rent might not may or may not, like, there's a debate to happen.
Mhm.
And that's the whole purpose of this. And I've seen so many times in policy development, and this is the whole purpose that we want to use in development, is that the folks writing the policy don't have the lived experience of the potential impact to communities that they just don't have the awareness for. And this forces that conversation, like, oh, we should reach out to somebody. I think this checks the box. It's not perfect, but it gets us there.
So even in saying that, I'm hearing you say things like like it forces a debate, it forces conversation. So in my mind, that's also hearing that this is something that needs to be done by multiple people from multiple different perspectives.
Yeah.
So maybe that's also something that we want to include in the intended use is, this is not just for one person to go through and say and make the final call. It's really a tool to start conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like all members of the tag, for example, for the PUC, when they're writing a rule or making an order, maybe all three members of the commission need to do this. Not just the chair, for example.
Right.
I think that makes sense because the whole point is if you're filling it out by yourself and really not having anyone there to do what Jen and I just did and be like, well, what do you mean? Then it's like the value is, in my opinion, is you're not going to get as good a data as when you have that conversation. So yeah, I think we should probably be pretty explicit about that and be like, members of the group making such a decision should all do this.
Right. Or say it's a starting point for reflection and discussion is how we intend it. And I'm sorry, I do have to jump off because I'm
No.
leaving this other meeting.
Understood. Yeah.
And then just for wrapping up, so next, and Jen, feel free to jump off.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
For next week, is there somebody who can take a lead in kind of walking the group through like the decisions? And yeah, I see Chris. Okay.
I'd be happy to just respond, and I hope I'll share that with Jen and Ben, and if the language isn't right, but it feels like we're all in the consensus of the recommendation.
Definitely. I'm glad we revisited for sure.
And I think even explaining to the group just what it was like kind of in this process of having the three of you go through it together and how that sparked conversation, I think that will be helpful because you will have been the only group to actually, walk through some of it. I'm not sure if it makes sense to try to go through the rest of it and see, just so that you can finish it and like see if like the tallying piece has any what that feels like, but that's
So I can share that I have done that on my own in the past when we've been teeing up discussions like before the EAG. And what I can say, it forced me to, when I did have a couple questions that are areas where it did have, a near zero result, or there was some harmful. So it did cause me to really focus in on that because it's makes it abundantly clear. It's like, okay, I mark that as like a -1, like that's clear harm. And it does force you to pause and be like, okay, well, why? And think through that. So that's what it triggered for me. And I think, that's how it probably would be for others as well. I think, it's really a conversation starter and forces you, it's really a problem identifier or identifies harm. And I think it's really effective.
I'm less enthusiastic about the actual score and just the fact that we just call out that a harm was made, because we didn't weight the scores and we didn't say like one getting a harm can have more significant weight than another one having harm, and we didn't do that. So just to treat them equally was we didn't get to that level. So I just
good point.
Anyway.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think that's actually a tremendously good point, because it's like, so the scores are more or less symbolic, but force conversation on the issue. Because the degree of harm is not identified here, but the fact that there is harm generally is, given that we're at the stage we are at the policy development process, you know, that forces a pause. Because ideally, we don't want any harm in this policy. So just identifying that, I think, is really all that's needed from this. You know, I don't think you're suggesting that we go do all the weighting and everything, because that would be
Right.
make it
No.
overly complicated, right?
Yeah, I was like the opposite. Like, let's drop the score and just say like what the assessment was for that question, and just that would be sufficient.
Sounds good. So with that, I do want to go ahead and close up. But for next meeting, when we'll continue this conversation, I think you have about 15 minutes to talk through. And so what I would do is mention, okay, how did we change any wording? How did we, what is the new kind of like rationale behind how you're supposed to use this, and how will we communicate that to the tag or to the PUC or anyone else who needs to be communicated to, and then speak specifically about this experience of like having the conversation, how you used it, and then Ben also how you used it on your own. I think that would be helpful for the whole here.
Yeah, I think that. Thank you for summarizing, and I will to prepare for that conversation. I just had some sort of grammatical edits that I thought should be made to a couple of those questions in there, so I can send those along. You know, and they can be considered, but they were minor. So I'm glad we can do that sort of offline, as it were. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great job.
Have a great
Take care.
afternoon.
Bye now.
Yeah.